Welcome to Friday night's video in our second Master Series. I do believe this is the 40th video in our second Master Series and the first video dealing with phase meters. Now, when we're dealing with phase meters, we'll be talking about phase meters that are dealing with stereo field analysis, phase analysis, and we'll be dealing with correlation meters. Now, there's a bunch of videos on my channel. There's some videos on looking at phase meters. There's, in my first Master Series, there's a video or two on dealing with phase. And there's a bunch of videos in mixing concepts and the videos right before mixing concepts on my Master Series about dealing with stereo field things, and in the mixing phases in my first Master Series. And I really do suggest you back and watch those to give you a little bit better understanding of some of the things we're dealing with. But we are looking at this analysis tool so that we can become that next level master audio engineer. And one of the biggest things is keeping it open so that you can see things that are going on and start to see footprints of things that are going on when changes are happening, so that you can make a determination of whether or not that's acceptable or not. Sometimes you'll be dealing with phase problems, and they're really easy to see on a phase meter. Sometimes you can hear it, sometimes you can't hear it really well, and sometimes a little bit is okay depending on the production or your personal taste. We always come back to, for you that might be okay, and actually it might be something really cool that's happening in your production where somebody else might not see it that way and do it a little bit differently. So to tell you which way is right or wrong would be ridiculous, because more than likely that somebody's going to think that's a good thing to do at some point, which would make it wrong for me to tell you that's wrong. Correct? Right. So anyway, the concept here, there's a couple different things. The first thing to get through your head is whenever we're dealing with phase, any type of phase issues itself are pretty easy to deal with. And you can look at those videos about phase and, dealing with phase in that first Master Series, that issue isn't that difficult. The varying degrees of it and what is acceptable is a different thing, and how that might affect other tracks when they're summed together can be a whole nother problem of looking at phase issues. So just about at any area as you're going through your production and at any phase that you're at, that the stereo field, phase issues, correlation problems can be issues that you're going to want to be aware of, that as you become that next level master audio engineer, a lot of times you'll just catch it with your ears. Sometimes things are slightly not that easy to catch. It's why we have meters, because it's not so easy to catch that with your ears sometimes. Otherwise we wouldn't have no meters. If your ears were that good and your eyeballs was that good, without having any meters, they would have never made them. So that's obviously not true to some point, right? So they have a purpose, and the more you keep them out, the more purpose they'll have, because you will find yourself catching things, with your meters. And this is the next meter that's going to be of huge importance to you. The last short segment we did on impulse frequency response, I put in there because it wasn't as much a metering thing as much as for you to understand that the concept is something that's eventually going to cause you to keep all your meters out to see if that issue might be causing a problem, and whether it might be good or bad in some situations, which is going to take time. But this is a straight up metering issue, and the meter that we're dealing with. Now in the next video, we'll go through looking at the meter at itself and what it's showing us, so that we have a really good idea, first of all, before we start looking at some things, what it's trying to show us, so that we're not confused in any way, shape, or form about the simple things it's trying to show us. And I'm going to make it very clear again that this meter was designed to deal with simpler issues. Okay, now in music production, that music is very complicated, and all the sinusoids and all the things that are happening with sound can be very complicated. So sometimes little things happening are just a fact of life in the studio and dealing with music, because it is a lot of information getting summed by the time you get a mix done. And trying to fix every little teeny issue, it would be ridiculous. I mean, you go to a point to where you have to stop somewhere, and so just keep that in mind so you don't get lost, in the, it's not totally perfect, because, you know, whether or not you see it's totally perfect or not is questionable, because it comes to a point to where it's music, so music is perfect in its own way, and you trying to perfect it to the point to where it's not musical anymore makes it not musical. So always keep that in mind. The next thing that I wanted to really point out is when we get into the meter, a huge thing that you're really going to want to keep in mind is it changes. This is a problematic topic, just like a lot of times when we're dealing with like people talking about the scopes, why they don't use them, because they don't understand them. It's changing all the time. And what does that mean? It's bouncing around all over the place. One minute it looks like that, the next minute it looks like that, then it's off sideways, then it's like that. Well, it's doing that. This is just a little short segment, and it's doing all this stuff all over the dang place. How am I supposed to make any sense of that? And whether that's not good or not. And they just turn off their meter and start listening with their ears instead of using their eyeballs and their earballs, because it's really just not making any sense. We went through this when we were talking about the scope and the importance of seeing footprints and things that are happening that don't look like they should probably be looking, because of you familiarizing yourself with it by using a lot. So the phase meter is in the same type of arena. Sometimes the phase meter you pull out, you're looking for phase issues, and it's going to really show you. Sometimes you've got correlation issues, whether it's going mono, same kind of deal. It's really pointing that out to you. Sometimes when you're dealing with stereo issues, that it's not that obvious, and sometimes that you're trying to build the stereo field to some point, and as you become a better and better audio engineer, that those footprints will manifest themselves as something that you're familiar with, so that you can look at things besides listening to it and be able to tell slight differences of things that you've done, and be able to see the difference that's happening besides just hear it. Because sometimes, I've told you a lot of times, sometimes just a little bit of salt in the soup is just enough. And if you add too much, it's too much. If it's not enough, it's not enough. And it may not be that much. And trying to visualize that can sometimes be difficult. Sometimes trying to hear that can be difficult, especially if you're tired and working through a big production. So they're always helpful. Something to help your ears. You obviously want to trust your ears. You're an audio engineer, so there's no doubt about that. And we talked about that in critical listening and things like that earlier in this master series. But mastering your abilities at visualizing that is helping take you to that next level, because you're going to be able to visualize. If you can master both of them, then you have a better chance of doing a better job. So it's a valid argument. Now, the biggest issue that I wanted to point out whenever you're dealing with phase issues, I just kind of spoke of a little bit, is this never-ending changing landscape that seems to develop sometimes. And this is problematic, because if you look at this and it's bouncing around all over the place, that you're thinking, when is this good or bad? When is this good or bad? Well, one of the concepts here is that if I go into here, and I stop this right here and I start it, and I go right there at the beginning, I could see an issue that it was going off to the side somewhere. And I'm going along and I'm seeing right there, it changed a little bit. So right about there, it changed. It was a drastic change. This right here, it went into something else right there. Something happened right there at that point in time, and I wanted to get a little flag there. Something's going on. And there, it went sideways on me. It actually went sideways. And I'm going along, and I'm watching these things happen. There, it went flat, almost. It went almost, straight across, like that. So I'm putting a flag there. And I'm going along. Now, this can go on and on and on. Now, the concept here, as you become a better and better audio engineer, that you'll probably find yourself doing this not as much as somebody that's new to looking at phase issues, stereo field issues, correlation issues, and things like that. But here's the kicker, is that as you get used to doing that, this is what happens. See, now you're sitting there and you're listening to this thing going across here, and you're listening to it as it goes across the timeline. Now, if I just play it, these things are all happening at these markers, right? Well, you aren't normally used to making that a mark as there's an edit problem. Probably if you're not really that next level master audio engineer and that used to your phase meter and stereo field meter, to where you're not putting marks up there. I mean, you may sometimes be able to hear it. You'll be like, oh, I heard something right there, marker. I heard something right there, marker. I heard something right there, marker. But with you listening and visualizing it at the same time and really watching what's happening, it makes you go back and see what's happening there. So an example of that is right here. I have this marker, right? So basically, something is happening right here at the beginning of this when this vocal starts. That is some type of stereo field phase issue, correct? So whether or not I was reading some kind of issue with my correlation meter or the meter itself here, this Gonio meter, that basically it's pointed something out. Now, this is a really huge issue for people who are starting to get into trying to be that next level audio engineer by using their eyeballs also besides their earballs, that some of these things can be slight to where now you are going back catching little issues and doing different types of editing that you're not normally used to doing to try to make it as good as possible. Because this is a stereo track, but I'm not having a problem in here, in here, in here, in here, over here, over here. But here, I'm having a problem. Here, I'm having some kind of issue. I don't know exactly what that is, but as I become a better audio engineer and trust this tool is telling me something is happening that wasn't happening here, that I can go analyze that. And I can go, well, I'm looping that area and I'm determining that there's some other thing happening there with the phases of correlation or something. Then I'm going to go analyze that piece of audio. I'm going to expand that out some and really look at what's going on in the waveform there and start picking that apart, trying to figure out if there's an issue there, and then really intently, acutely listen to it to listen to what that issue is. I'm going to loop that right there and go, what is happening there? What right there? What is that? What is that sound? When it does that, why does it sound like that? Is that an issue or isn't it? And you will find that as you do that, as like a stereo track here, this is a vocal. So as the vocalist goes along, certain things happen. They're moving around, or who knows what's happening, or the way they're vocalizing things. All kinds of things are just normally happening that can be issues that you can make better because it is an issue, that something changed there, that either your software or the way you recorded it or or they moved a little bit or on and on and on, that something happened that is different. So that's as big you spotting that and starting to see those footprints, so that as you're going along, as you get to become a better and better audio engineer, that you're seeing that right here, it's going to change to something else. Right there, changed. Right there, changed. Right here, coming up here, it changed again. You know, and on and on and on. And you start dissecting that, trying to figure out what that problem is. As you understand, you know, when by the time we get done with this short segment in this master series on phase meters and Gonio meters and correlation meters and stereo field meters, that it will become really obvious that it's not static. And you'll come to this understanding that it's not static. I don't have this static thing happening like a level meter telling me everything's staying at, minus 12 dB. That's not happening, bro. I mean, it is not. So things are changing. So you are coming to a whole new level of being this next level master audio engineer by understanding there's changes happening for you to analyze to see whether or not you can fix them or not to make things better. So it's a huge thing to get in your head just to get it open and start working with it. So I certainly hope you enjoyed this first intro video on looking at phase meters, Gonio meters, and correlation meters and stereo field meters. And I will see you in the next video.